And good evening. Tonight, the Justice Department saying it foiled an Iranian plot to kill President-elect Trump, taking 3 people into custody. That shocking announcement coming just 2 days after Trump won the presidential election. The Department of Justice saying a member of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps instructed one of the defendants to surveil and come up with a plan to carry out an assassination on Trump. 3 men were charged, including 2 Americans. The Americans arrested in New York are accused of helping the Iranian government surveil another U.S. citizen originally from Iran. Trump's team releasing this statement saying, quote, President-elect Trump is aware of the attempted assassination plot by the Iranian terrorist regime. Nothing will deter President Trump from returning to the White House and restoring peace around the world. That scheme coming to light just as Trump continues to build his new administration. Still a number of roles left to be filled. These are some of the candidates in the running for top positions we reported last night. That his campaign manager, Susie Wiles, was named White House Chief of Staff, the first woman to ever take on that role. Also tonight, new reporting from Axios detailing a phone call between President-elect Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky. During that call, Trump reportedly handed the phone over to Elon Musk. Questions continue to swirl over what role the tech billionaire will play in a second Trump term. We got a lot to get to this evening. Let's start off with Garrett Hake tonight.
President-elect Trump has already survived 2 assassination attempts, and tonight the FBI is saying it foiled a 3rd. This one a plot by Iran to kill Trump before the election.
These individuals allegedly plotted to murder an American citizen on our soil at the direction of a foreign terrorist organization.
According to a criminal complaint, Iranian operative Farhad Shakeri told the FBI the plot was hatched by a member of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, considered a terrorist organization by the U.S. Shakeri said he was asked by that Iranian official to kill Trump in September. Shakeri replied it would, quote, cost a huge amount of money. Shakeri said the official then said, we have already spent a lot of money, so money's not an issue. Then telling Shakeri to provide a plan within 7 days to kill Trump, and if not, to wait until after the election, because Iran believed Trump would lose, quote, and afterwards it would be easier to assassinate him. 2 of Shakeri's alleged associates were arrested. Photos of their weapons were included in the DOJ complaint, while Shakeri is at large, believed to be in Iran. Trump supporters now demanding the president-elect get more security.
They are trying to kill, right now as we speak, President-elect Trump. They think they can get away with it. And that is what's so disturbing.
A Trump spokesperson saying, quote, nothing will deter President Trump from returning to the White House and restoring peace around the world. It comes as Trump's decisive margin of victory is growing. NBC News projecting that Trump will win Nevada, which means he's won 6 of the 7 battleground states. Only Arizona remains unsettled, with Trump in the lead. Trump tonight working out of his Mar-a-Lago home, focused on filling out his new administration, reportedly favoring cabinet candidates who come from outside Washington and have business experience over members of Congress, according to 2 sources familiar with the transition process. We're also told that billionaire hedge fund manager Scott Bessent is now a leading contender for Treasury Secretary.
I'm going to do whatever President Trump asks.
Meanwhile, a federal judge granting a request by special counsel Jack Smith for a 1-month pause to decide how to proceed in his case against Trump, which will likely come to an end. And tonight, some Democratic governors announcing they'll resist new Trump policies. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey was asked if her state police would cooperate on mass deportations.
No, absolutely not. Every tool in the toolbox has got to be used to protect our citizens, to protect our residents, and protect our states.
Okay, Garrett Hake joins us tonight from Washington. Garrett, so many headlines to talk about. Let's go back to that foiled Iranian plot to assassinate the president-elect. So he has these threats from domestic actors, and now we have this issue with Iran as well. What's the status of his Secret Service detail? Are they stepping up security measures?
At this point, Tom, his detail is essentially as stepped up as it can be, and that's really been the case since after that second assassination attempt. There have been more security measures put in place since then. A lot of them haven't been reported, in part because the Secret Service and the Trump campaign don't want to talk about any of it on the record, but they believe, at least the Secret Service does, that his security right now is on par with the President of the United States. There's very little more that can be done for him at this point.
Yeah, and Garrett, also in your piece, you talked about the jockeying for positions in the cabinet and that the transition team seemingly favoring non-politicians, possibly people outside from D.C. How does that, what does that mean for people like Senator Tim Scott and Senator Marco Rubio, who are also close to the president-elect?
Well, it may mean they're on the outside looking in when this process is over. Tim Scott seems to have made that conclusion himself. He announced just today that he's going to run to be the NRSC chairman, the person essentially in charge of electing Senate Republicans in the next cycle, suggesting he'll be busy being a senator. Marco Rubio seems to still be in the mix for a couple of different positions. It's not as though there will be no lawmakers selected by Trump and his team to serve in the cabinet, but they look back at his first administration and feel like the people who came in from the outside world, like Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, or Ben Carson, stayed longer, were more loyal, and ended up being less scandal-prone than the lawmakers they picked, without the risk of somebody being replaced by a Democrat in a special election, which they simply cannot afford, given how close the margins are going to be in both chambers of Congress.
All right, Garrett, long week for you. No worries. All right, we thank you, Garrett. As the new Trump administration begins to take shape, Democrats' fears are growing about what the president-elect could do to further reshape the Supreme Court. Trump appointed 3 justices in his first term alone, but in the next 4 years, he may have the chance to impact the trajectory of that court even more. Gabe Gutierrez has this one.
Tonight, in the wake of President-elect Trump's decisive victory, there's growing scrutiny on what it means for the U.S. Supreme Court. Republicans celebrating after Trump picked 3 justices during his first term.
We could get to appoint another 1 or 2, maybe. But I do watch that very closely.
He also worked with Senate Republicans to confirm 234 federal judges. With voters giving control of the Senate back to the GOP, Democrats are now dreading what could be next. What most concerns you about a second Trump term?
That he's going to get to appoint more Supreme Court justices and take a court that is already out of touch and make it more extreme.
Some Democrats are also privately asking whether liberal Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who's 70 years old and diabetic, should step down so President Biden could replace her. Sonia Sotomayor needs to retire right now, a Democratic official working in the Biden administration told NBC News. She's shown no indication of doing so. Meanwhile, Democrats are analyzing how the Harris campaign raised $1 billion and still lost.
The party itself has increasingly become a smarty-pants, suburban, college-educated party, and it lends itself to the kind of backlash that we've seen.
Late today, Vice Presidential nominee Tim Walz weighing in.
It's hard to understand why so many of our fellow citizens, people that we have fought so long and hard for, wound up choosing the other path.
Gabe Gutierrez joins us tonight from the White House. Gabe, I want to go back to that whisper campaign to try to get Justice Sotomayor to retire at some point before Biden leaves office. Is that gaining steam? I mean, she's the first Hispanic to ever be a Supreme Court justice. Is this something the Democrats want to sort of have their fingerprints on?
Look, Tom, it's unlikely at this point. I spoke with one lawmaker today who stressed it was entirely her decision. And as we said, she has shown no signs of stepping down. Also, it'd be hard to get anyone confirmed in such a relatively short time frame. And there's a risk no one would be confirmed by the time Republicans take over the Senate. So right now, this sounds like just chatter at this point. But it does speak to the deepening anxiety among Democrats, especially as they try to avoid a repeat of Trump choosing Ruth Bader Ginsburg's replacement. Tom.
It's a lot of good points, and as the Democrats do some soul-searching now after this defeat, I know former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi is weighing in on Vice President Harris's defeat. And what is she saying tonight, Gabe?
Yeah, former House Speaker Pelosi is telling the New York Times that it would have been better if President Biden had gotten out of the race sooner, so the party could have had an open primary to choose his replacement. And she said President Biden endorsing Harris right away made that impossible. She now says we live with what happened, perhaps an attempt at washing her hands of the election loss amid all the criticism of party leadership. Tom?
All right, Gabe Gutierrez first. Gabe, we thank you for that. For more on Trump's possible impact on the court and his transition team's search for his new cabinet and everything that's going on with the Democratic Party right now, I want to bring in Julia Manchester, national politics reporter at The Hill and a friend to Top Story. Julia, always great to see you. First, I want to pick up where Gabe left off there about this news from former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, right? It seems like there's a lot of finger pointing right now. And for someone like Pelosi to come out and say Biden should have stepped aside earlier, I mean, shouldn't they have had that conversation earlier? And shouldn't they have put the pressure on like they did after the debate?
You would think so, Gabe, but they didn't. And I think there was definitely this fear to really speak out against President Biden. He was already in that position. And I think a lot of Democrats, going into President Biden's term after the 2020 election, there was this lack of clarity as to whether he would be running for a second term. He later, confirmed he would. But, I certainly think there were a lot of closed-door conversations, but no one really brought it up because there was a fear of repercussions or backlash really from the top of the party. But it's really no surprise hearing that from former Speaker Pelosi. We know that she was one of the most vocal voices to get Biden to step down, really working the gears behind the scene there in Congress and getting her allies together to speak out against it at the time. But certainly a lot of questions as to whether this could be avoided if Biden only planned on being a one-term president in the first place.
This is still all very fresh, but do you think that eventually when they write this story in the history of what happened here, President Biden is going to get the blame for not sort of making the decision that he wasn't capable to run again and he should have stepped aside earlier?
It's quite possible. I think right now, there's obviously a lot of, hurt feelings, personal feelings, particularly among with President Biden. You can assume that. Look, he had that very public, very disastrous debate performance, and then, of course, had that backlash. And we know that he was incredibly reluctant to step down, very stubborn. But at the same time, there are some theories out there. There are some Biden people, those close to the former president or the president, saying that, he perhaps could have won if he stayed on the ticket. I don't know if that would necessarily have happened.
You think people really believe that, Julia, after the results? You think people, the polling was not there ever. And I don't know if Democrats want to accept that or understand that. But, do you think they really believe that if he stayed on the ticket, he would win?
Yeah, Tom, I think it's a lot of wishful thinking.
It's a lot of spinning, right? Yeah.
It's a lot of spinning, but I got to say, in the days before President Biden stepped down from the ticket, I was writing a story about how the Trump campaign was feeling enthusiastic and starting to spend more money in Virginia, which we know is a blue-leaning state. We know that New Mexico, for example, Minnesota, the Republicans had their eyes on those states. So the map was not looking in favor of Biden. But look, there are different factions of the Democratic Party right now pointing fingers, and we can expect to see this spin and this "I told you so" really from all factions of the party.
What do you think about this whisper campaign when it comes to Sotomayor? Do you really think Democrats would want their fingerprints on something like that? Is that a real fear?
I think it goes back to, in many ways, during when Ruth Bader Ginsburg was on the court, sort of this pressure that we know that former President Obama, could put on her to step down in the case that there could be, essentially what happened where there would be an opportunity to replace her with a conservative justice. Right now, Democrats are very concerned about the way the Senate is looking. Republicans are going to take control, and there's a fear that there could be, if one of these left-leaning justices were to step down for whatever reason, that would give Donald Trump full authority to replace him or replace that justice with a conservative justice. We've seen how consequential the court has been on a number of issues, like the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So the concern is absolutely there. But we'll see what happens. We've seen, Supreme Court justices stay on the court well into their 70s and 80s even. So, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, let's turn over to Trump now and the transition team, right? A lot of reporting happening, and I'm getting flashbacks of 2016, the first Trump administration, when there would be 10 different stories written every hour about the Trump administration. It's sort of incredible how much that pace has changed now, and he hasn't even been inaugurated yet. I do want to ask you, do you think any of this stuff is true? We can take a look at some of the people that may or may not be on the short list, right? We never know. There is some reporting that he wants outsiders. There's a lot of people in Congress that have grown very close to the president. We see them here. Who do you think has the best shot?
Look, I think Senator Marco Rubio certainly has a very good shot of being Secretary of State. And, looking at that list just in general, one indicator is that all of those people, or most of those people, are making the rounds on cable television. We know that this is how, former President Trump likes to audition those close to him for these positions or to be on his campaign. We know that during the vice presidential nomination process or his choosing process, we saw Rubio, J.D. Vance, obviously, all over the airwaves. So we see all of those contenders on the airwaves. But look, I've been hearing a lot of chatter about Senator Rubio, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum for energy, but also Congresswoman Elise Stefanik for United Nations ambassador. I mean, that's pretty notable to me, given that she has become really a very pro-Israel voice among Republicans and a voice that has spoken out very strongly against anti-Semitism here in the U.S. and around the world. We'll remember roughly a year ago, or just under a year ago, there was that hearing with a number of the Ivy League school presidents, and she had that very viral moment, questioning them. So Elise Stefanik, definitely one to watch for that role. And if not that role, I think we could see her in some sort of more of a House leadership capacity.
Julia Manchester, we want to thank you. We want to thank Gabe Gutierrez and Garrett as well. A lot of great political coverage tonight. We thank you for all that. Turning now to Europe and what authorities are calling an outburst of anti-Semitic violence on the streets of Amsterdam. This story is so wild. Attacks on Israeli soccer fans after a match last night, leaving dozens of people injured. NBC's Megan Fitzgerald is there tonight for us.
Tonight, a violent and hate-fueled attack on Israeli soccer fans in Amsterdam. The mayor saying it was at the hands of anti-Semitic hit-and-run squads.
I got a punch in my face, in my lip. It was organized.
It happened in the hours after a game between Maccabi Tel Aviv and Ajax as fans poured out of the train station in the center of the city, including Edo Gold.
We saw a huge crowd, hundreds of people running in towards us, shouting Juden, Juden. That means Jews.
This for the children! The Israeli embassy in Washington says this video shows an Israeli fan being ambushed, though it's not been independently verified by NBC News. Free Palestine now! Dutch officials say people on scooters actively sought out Israelis to attack, punching and kicking them.
I'm ashamed that this happened in the Netherlands, and it's a terrible anti-Semitic attack.
Tensions had been building here ahead of the game. This video shows Israeli fans chanting death to Arabs. Another shows a Palestinian flag being ripped down. There's a history of heated clashes between passionate soccer fans, but Gold told me he has no doubt what motivated this attack.
It's not football, it's not sport, it's not politics, it's because I'm Jew.
Prosecutors say 62 were arrested, up to 30 people were injured, according to the police chief, with 5 taken to the hospital. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu compared the violence to Kristallnacht, the night 86 years ago tomorrow when mobs attacked Jewish people in Germany. 18-year-old Tavel Karo is hiding in a safe house with other frightened Israelis.
We're all the Jews in one building like we're in the Holocaust again. 8 years later, and it still feels the same in Europe.
Some fans left on commercial planes sent by Israel. Tonight, they're grateful to be home.
Okay, and with that, Megan Fitzgerald joins us tonight from Amsterdam. Were the authorities there not prepared for this, Megan?
Well, Tom, you know, what we usually see at high-profile games like the one we saw last night is a police presence around the stadium. And fans tell us that's exactly what they saw. They say that they felt comfortable at the game, and when they left the game, it's when they took the train here to the center of Amsterdam that things started to get violent and dangerous, and they said that police were not around.
And then what's next for that Israeli team playing in Europe?
Right. So, you know, we're just now hearing from Turkish officials who say that the game that's meant to be with Maccabi Tel Aviv at the end of the month in Turkey is now going to be moved to a more neutral location. And they say they're trying to prevent any nefarious or dangerous behavior from taking place at that game. But discussions are still underway as to where exactly that game will be taking place. Tom?
Okay, Megan, we thank you for that. Now to the wildfire emergencies here at home amid a prolonged drought. The mountain fire in California burning 20,000 acres and destroying at least 132 homes. The Santa Ana winds dying down, but firefighters now racing to contain the blaze before windy conditions start up again. Dana Griffin is in Southern California.
Tonight in Southern California, the devastation revealed. 132 homes and counting have been destroyed, dozens more damaged. Santa Ana winds dying down, but the firefight continues.
Firefighters using this small reservoir on a nearby ranch to scoop up the water and carry it to the front line.
At the height of the firestorm, fear and uncertainty heard over crew radios.
We're going to have numerous fatalities in here if we don't have companies engaged.
Damage so vast, a state of emergency declared by California's governor. Overnight, Brandon Francis's family returning to utter devastation.
I haven't heard or felt winds that intense before, so I knew something was coming. It smells like fire.
This was the scene as the fire approached their Camarillo home.
So that's a fire. There's 3 around us right now.
Evacuating Wednesday with a 7-week-old baby.
What are you most grateful for?
Survival of my family, just that we got out in time.
The family's intimate moments, once shared in this home, now a pile of rubble. Are all of your memories gone?
No, they're right here. They're right here and they're up here. You know, these are just things. It's just stuff. And what we really want to count on is family.
In New Jersey, firefighters working through the night to stop growing flames that prompted new evacuation orders in Bergen County. In the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, 50 million are under red flag warnings. Back in California, crews are confident they'll knock this fire down as they brace for windy conditions next week that could stoke more flames.
Okay, Dana Griffin joins us now live from Camarillo tonight. So, Dana, you're there at an avocado nursery that was on fire earlier. How are firefighters doing with this wildfire that seems to be growing out of control?
Well, Tom, the good news is those Santa Ana winds have calmed down, and what we're seeing behind us, this was some sort of flare-up / spot fire. This area had been taken care of yesterday, but then it started going, and for most of the day, we've seen some activity here. We've seen firefighters doing airdrops to try to put as much water to suppress some of the flames. You can see some of the smoke in the background. Even the owner of this avocado nursery, he went out with his own dozer to try to scoop up some of the mulch, and I can actually hear a helicopter in the distance, Tom. I don't know if you can see it. It's coming our way. These are the helicopters that are dropping waters as we speak, and they've been coming around, you know, just within a matter of minutes, one after the next. We'll see if they drop one, you know, live on air here, but they are trying their best to try to stop these sort of flare-ups from happening. And so this is what the real-life firefighting scene is like out here. For those who've never seen it, this is how they try to attack it from above, because some of these canyonous areas are just so hard to really tackle here.
Okay, Dana Griffin for us right there on the fire lines. We appreciate it. For more on the wildfire dangers on both coasts, NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns joins us tonight. So, Bill, walk us through the conditions and what they're like heading into the weekend.
Yeah, first where Dana is located here in Camarillo, and you can notice they're about to do that airdrop on some hot spots. The winds have been down, so the fire is not spreading rapidly anymore. There's just a lot of hot spots, and we're going to get another Santa Ana wind event in the middle of next week. So they want to get this mopped up this weekend and cleaned up so we don't have to deal with it, you know, explosively growing again by the time we get to the middle of next week. So that's good for there. As far as the areas that burned, most of the structures are on the southern portion here, just north of downtown Camarillo. In the mountainous areas here was the larger area, but not as many structures up here in the hills. So tonight the winds are lower, humidity's up, firefighters should get a good grip on it. Now to the northeast, numerous brush fires today, including that one that was just outside of New York City this morning with smoke blowing into the Bronx. And they were actually dipping water buckets in the Hudson River to put it out. I never said that before. So tomorrow, all the way through southern New England, down through Long Island, including the New York City area, red flag warning again tomorrow, gusty winds, dry conditions, and then things may begin to improve. There are still some high winds out there this evening, but this will come down later on as we go throughout the overnight hours. So that'll be good. Any brush fires that did form, they should be able to put out. And here's the best news of all, Tom. We actually, for the first time since the end of September, 6 weeks ago, have some rain coming through the northeast. This will be Sunday afternoon. This is not a ton of heavy rain, but we'll take whatever we can get, about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch Sunday evening.
Yeah, we will take it. It's been dry out there. Okay, Bill, we thank you for that. We want to go back to Europe now, what authorities are calling an outburst, as we mentioned, of anti-Semitic violence on the streets of Amsterdam. Attacks again on Israeli soccer fans after a match last night, leaving dozens of people injured. The country of Israel is now involved. NBC's Megan Fitzgerald is there with the latest.
Tonight, a violent and hate-fueled attack on Israeli soccer fans in Amsterdam. The mayor saying it was at the hands of anti-Semitic hit-and-run squads.
I got a punch in my face, in my lip. It was organized.
It happened in the hours after a game between Maccabi Tel Aviv and Ajax as fans poured out of the train station in the center of the city, including Edo Gold.
We saw a huge crowd, hundreds of people running in towards us, shouting Juden, Juden. That means Jews.
This one of children! The Israeli embassy in Washington says this video shows an Israeli fan being ambushed, though it's not been independently verified by NBC News. Free Palestine now! Dutch officials say people on scooters actively sought out Israelis to attack, punching and kicking them.
I'm ashamed that this happened in the Netherlands, and it's a terrible anti-Semitic attack.
Tensions had been building here ahead of the game. This video shows Israeli fans chanting death to Arabs. Another shows a Palestinian flag being ripped down. There's a history of heated clashes between passionate soccer fans, but Gold told me he has no doubt what motivated this attack.
It's not football, it's not sport, it's not politics, it's because I'm Jew.
Prosecutors say 62 were arrested, up to 30 people were injured, according to the police chief, with 5 taken to the hospital. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu compared the violence to Kristallnacht, the night 86 years ago tomorrow when mobs attacked Jewish people in Germany. 18-year-old Tavel Karo is hiding in a safe house with other frightened Israelis.
We're all the Jews in one building like we're in the Holocaust again. 8 years later, and it still feels the same in Europe.
Some fans left on commercial planes sent by Israel. Tonight, they're grateful to be home.
Okay, and with that, Megan Fitzgerald joins us tonight from Amsterdam. Were the authorities there not prepared for this, Megan?
Well, Tom, you know, what we usually see at high-profile games like the one we saw last night is a police presence around the stadium, and fans tell us that's exactly what they saw. They say that they felt comfortable at the game, and when they left the game, it's when they took the train here to the center of Amsterdam that things started to get violent and dangerous, and they said that police were not around.
And then what's next for that Israeli team playing in Europe?
Right. So, you know, we're just now hearing from Turkish officials who say that the game that's meant to be with Maccabi Tel Aviv at the end of the month in Turkey is now going to be moved to a more neutral location. And they say they're trying to prevent any nefarious or dangerous behavior from taking place at that game. But discussions are still underway as to where exactly that game will be taking place. Tom.
Okay, Megan, we thank you for that. Still ahead tonight, the husband of a missing Texas woman charged with her murder. The shocking social media post from one of her daughters accusing her dad of that crime. Plus the car explosion. Look at this, rocking a New York City neighborhood. What was left inside that car that led to the blast? And the LA district attorney voted out of office. Could this mean bad news for the resentencing of the Menendez brothers? Stay with us. Okay, we are back now with a story we've been following out of Texas. A beloved wife and mother vanishing last month after a neighbor saw her get into a fight with her husband. Her daughter alleging in a post on social media that her father killed her mother in a moment of rage. Now tonight, police have filed a murder charge. NBC's Valerie Castro reports.
More than a month after San Antonio mom Suzanne Simpson vanished, tonight Texas police have charged her husband, Brad Simpson, with her murder.
We realize that this doesn't bring closure to Suzanne's family, but we hope it will allow them to enter the next phase of their grieving process with more clarity.
The mother of 4 and local realtor.
I'm Suzanne. I've been in real estate for 13 years.
Last seen in early October when a neighbor told investigators they saw her husband of more than 20 years fighting with her, grabbing her outside the couple's home. This week, their daughter making a stunning allegation in a social media post obtained by our San Antonio affiliate, writing, "My father took my mother's life in a state of rage and control. As my mother's daughter, I will tell our story over and over again with every breath. I will make sure you remember her name."
I just don't understand. I don't understand why it happened.
Police first arrested Brad late last month on charges including assault and family violence. They now say they have enough evidence to charge him with murder, though they have not shared specific details, and Suzanne's body has not been found.
The search for Suzanne is still ongoing.
Brad Simpson's friend and longtime business partner James Cotter is out on bail tonight after he was arrested and charged with evidence tampering. According to police, Cotter allegedly hid an AK-47 belonging to Brad behind a wall 2 days after his wife disappeared. Neither Mr. Simpson or Mr. Cotter's attorneys have responded to NBC News' request for comment. Suzanne's family tonight making this emotional appeal to her alleged killer to help locate her remains.
It is our sincere hope and prayer that Brad will find the compassion and courage to end his family's suffering by cooperating with the authorities to help us find his wife.
But until Suzanne's body is found, her family saying the charge has at least started to bring closure.
This helps us come to terms with the reality that Suzanne is no longer with us, allowing us to continue the difficult process of grieving and focus on rebuilding our lives for the sake of the children and our extended family.
Valerie Castro joins us in studio. So, Valerie, do we know what new evidence police have that they were able to charge the husband?
Right now we don't, and it could be 30 days before we have any more information. The judge has ordered the arrest affidavit sealed in this case until then, because investigators say it still contains a lot of sensitive information. Remember, they are still looking for Suzanne, presumably her body. In the meantime, her husband, Brad, is being held on a $2 million bond.
Okay. Valerie Castro, we thank you for that. We are back now with Top Stories Newsfeed. We begin with the FBI's investigation into racist text messages targeting black Americans across more than a dozen states. The anonymous messages use the person's name, and while the text varies, some say the person was, quote, selected for slavery or to report to an address for slavery. The texts were received throughout the week, some targeting middle, high school, and college students. No word yet on who exactly is responsible. A car explosion rocking one New York City neighborhood. Take a look at this, a home security cam capturing the moment. Wow. And an Infiniti SUV blows apart in Queens. Luckily, no one was in the car at the time and no one was hurt. That's incredible. 5 homes and nearby cars were damaged. Officials saying there was a leaking pressurized gas cylinder in the car that caused that explosion. Pretty crazy. Okay, more than 500,000 space heaters. 500,000 space heaters recalled after 7 fires and a burn injury. The Consumer Product Safety Commission saying the Govee Life and Govee Smart electric space heaters can overheat, leading to potential fires and burns. The defective heaters were sold on Amazon and TikTok. The commission telling people to stop using the heaters and contact the company for a full refund. And Tesla once again hitting a $1 trillion market cap after President-elect Trump's victory. Shares growing a whopping 23% since Wednesday. The dramatic shift in fortune for the company also boosting CEO Elon Musk's net worth to around $300 billion. Musk frequently campaigned for Trump and may even be tapped for a new role in the administration. Okay, we're going to turn now to the Americas, where thousands of migrants are rushing to make it to the U.S. before President-elect Trump is sworn in, promising to conduct mass deportations as soon as he takes office. A caravan making the journey north through Mexico, shrinking to half its original size following news of Trump's win, according to officials. But U.S. border authorities still preparing for a possible uptick in crossings. Ellison Barber has the details.
Tonight, hundreds of miles south of the border in Mexico, a caravan of migrants chanting, "We are not criminals," is rushing to make it to the U.S.-Mexico border before the Trump administration is sworn in. Many carrying their belongings in plastic bags and on their backs, and already starting to voice their fears about not being able to cross into the United States come January. "I think it will be much more complicated now," says this man who's traveling from Venezuela. "Now we are thinking about finding a way to get through before Trump takes the presidency." DHS officials telling NBC News that they have not yet seen a surge in migrants heading to the United States, but that they want CBP and ICE officials to be prepared.
One of the first calls I'm going to make is to Mexico. You stop letting people come in through our border.
Trump now vowing to deport millions of undocumented migrants, saying his plan has, quote, no price tag. He's also threatening to impose a tariff of 25% on Mexican imports unless Mexico's government curbs what he describes as an onslaught of immigration. Those promises now creating uncertainty and anxiety among migrants making the taxing journey. This caravan, which set off with nearly 3,000 people on Election Day, has dwindled to just about half of its original size, according to Reuters. This man from Venezuela saying now that Trump has won, he doesn't know what to do, but returning to Venezuela for him is like being shot in the head. Migrants in Mexican border cities waiting for legal entry through the CBP-1 program now also worried their plans might be upended. Some, like this woman, are anxious that the appointments they've waited months for under the CBP-1 program could be canceled. On Friday, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum saying she had a, quote, very friendly phone call with Trump in which they congratulated each other's presidential wins and said there will be time in the future to discuss the border issue. Time that many migrants now fear is running out for them.
Okay, Ellison Barber joins us now in studio. So, Ellison, going back to that CBP-1 app that you mentioned, this is something the Biden administration set up. Has the Trump administration or the Trump team said anything yet about what they're going to do with that?
So it's interesting because they obviously spend so much time talking about their plans as it relates to the U.S.-Mexico border. But in terms of comments about CBP-1 in particular, really not a lot of detailed comments from Donald Trump himself. However, back in mid-September, we did find where he mentioned CBP-1 in a post on X and Truth Social. He said in part this, quote, "We will stop all migrant flights, end all illegal entries, terminate the Kamala phone app for smuggling illegals," put in parentheses there, CBP-1 app, and then he went on to list a couple of other things. So he talked about it.
And that can be kind of chaotic because people are in the queue already in some
Right, people are in the queue, and what he hasn't said, which is what's making so many people panic, he's made this comment saying, I would terminate that app, but hasn't said when that would happen, hasn't said how, or how it would fit into his broader immigration policies moving forward, and that's part of why so many people are like, we don't know what's going to happen next, but you said you might get rid of this. Even if it was in that one post, it's leading to a lot of additional questions.
And I'm sure we'll learn in January as soon as he takes office. Ellison, we thank you for that, and we will be right back. We thank you for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.